You sit in a room full of people, listening to conversations, watching laughter fill the air, and somehow you still feel completely alone. Nobody has rejected you today. Nobody has insulted you. Nobody has told you that you do not belong. Yet something inside you quietly whispers that you are different. You have tried to ignore that feeling for years. You have tried to become more like everyone else. You forced yourself into conversations that exhausted you, friendships that never truly understood you, environments where you smiled on the outside while wondering why your heart always felt somewhere else. Sometimes you blamed yourself. Maybe I am too sensitive. Maybe I think too much. Maybe I care too deeply. Maybe something is wrong with me. There were nights when you lay awake replaying every interaction, wondering why connecting with people seemed effortless for everyone else, while it always felt like work for you. You watched others build friendships quickly, while you struggled to find even one person who truly understood what was happening inside your heart. Even when people loved you, there remained a strange emptiness that no conversation seemed able to fill. It felt as though everyone else had received instructions on how to live in this world, while you were somehow left trying to figure everything out alone. You have probably asked God questions you never dared ask anyone else. Why do I always feel like the outsider? Why do I never seem to fit in? Why do I keep feeling like I am watching life instead of fully living it? And perhaps the hardest question of all was the one you never wanted to admit. God, did you make me this way? Those questions often came after another disappointment, another relationship that slowly faded, another group where you hoped you had finally found your place, only to realize once again that something remained missing. Another season where everybody else appeared to be moving forward while you remained waiting without understanding why. The hardest part is that this feeling cannot always be explained. Your life may not even look terrible from the outside. You may have work, you may have family, you may have responsibilities, yet deep inside there is a homesickness you cannot describe. You long for something you cannot name. You miss a place you cannot remember. You carry a quiet ache that follows you into every new chapter of life. It is as though your soul keeps searching for something this world has never fully been able to offer. If these words describe what you have been carrying, know that you are not the only one. Many have walked through this hidden wilderness where the greatest battle is not visible to anyone else. If this message is finding you in that place today, leave a comment saying, "I understand." Sometimes simply knowing someone else has walked this path reminds us that we are not as alone as we thought. What makes this struggle so painful is that people often misunderstand it. They assume you are antisocial when you are actually longing for genuine connection. They think you are distant when you are simply protecting a heart that has learned how deeply rejection can hurt. They think you are quiet because you have nothing to say, while in reality, your mind never stops searching for meaning behind every conversation, every disappointment, every unexpected delay. Over time, you begin questioning your own identity. You wonder whether you should become someone else just to finally belong. You become exhausted, trying to wear different versions of yourself, depending on who is around you. Yet no matter how hard you try, there remains a part of you that refuses to disappear. It keeps reminding you that pretending may earn acceptance, but it never brings peace. That is one of the loneliest discoveries a person can make. You can spend years becoming acceptable to everyone while feeling completely unknown inside. There are moments when you almost convince yourself that lowering your standards, silencing your convictions, or hiding your compassion will finally make life easier. But every time you attempt it, something deep within your spirit becomes restless. It is as though God has planted something inside you that refuses to settle for a life built on pretending. This is where many people lose hope because they mistake their difference for failure. They believe something has gone wrong simply because life has not unfolded like everyone else's. Yet throughout Scripture, those whom God used often experienced seasons that looked remarkably similar. They lived through waiting that made no sense, isolation that nobody understood, and preparation that felt invisible. Before there was influence, there was obscurity. Before there was confidence, there were countless moments of uncertainty. Before there was purpose clearly revealed, there were years of asking questions that seemed to have no answers. Think about how often God accomplishes His deepest work where nobody else is watching. Seeds grow beneath the ground long before anyone celebrates the harvest. Roots spread through darkness before branches ever reach toward the sky. Gold is refined where no audience applauds the process. The world celebrates what is visible, but God often transforms people where only He can see them. Perhaps what has confused you most is that your prayers seemed sincere. You genuinely asked God to help you belong, yet He allowed certain relationships to fade. You prayed for acceptance, yet doors continued closing. You asked for clarity, yet more questions appeared. At first it felt like abandonment, later it felt like silence. But what if silence does not always mean absence? What if some of God's deepest work happens while your circumstances appear unchanged? Waiting has a way of exposing what hurried living keeps hidden. When everything slows down, you finally hear the fears you have been carrying. You discover how much of your identity depended on other people's approval. You realize how often you measured your worth by how accepted you felt. None of those discoveries are comfortable, yet they can become sacred moments because God often heals what life finally reveals. There is another reason this season feels so confusing. You have probably noticed that your heart reacts differently than many others. Things that seem small to everyone else affect you deeply. You notice pain that others overlook. You sense when someone is pretending to be fine. You cannot easily ignore injustice. You often carry burdens that were never even spoken aloud. At times you wished you could stop feeling so much because caring so deeply can become exhausting. But perhaps your sensitivity is not merely something to tolerate. Perhaps it is something God is slowly teaching you how to steward with wisdom. Every gift carries responsibility. Compassion without wisdom becomes burnout. Discernment without humility becomes pride. Strength without love becomes harshness. God often develops character before revealing calling because character can sustain what talent alone never could. Looking back, you may begin recognizing patterns you missed before. Certain disappointments protected you from becoming someone you were never meant to be. Certain delays prevented you from arriving somewhere before your heart was ready. Certain lonely seasons stripped away identities that depended entirely upon human approval. None of those moments felt good while you were living them. Some of them nearly broke you. Yet sometimes the breaking is not the end of the story. Sometimes it becomes the place where false identities finally fall away, leaving room for something far more genuine to grow. You may still not understand every reason why you have always felt different, and perhaps complete understanding will not come today. But maybe the question itself is beginning to change. Instead of asking what is wrong with me, perhaps your heart is slowly becoming willing to ask, what is God forming within me during this season that I cannot yet fully see? That question does not erase the loneliness overnight. It does not immediately answer every silent prayer. But it opens a small door where hope quietly enters again. And sometimes hope begins not with having every answer, but with believing that your story may hold deeper purpose than your present pain is able to reveal. Before this part of the journey ends, I want you to reflect on something. Think about every season when you believed you had been forgotten, only to later discover that God had quietly carried you through it. If you can remember even one such moment, share it in the comments. Your story may become the encouragement someone else desperately needs today. Because the journey is not over yet, and there is still something about this feeling of being different that has not been fully uncovered. There is a deeper reason your heart has never completely settled into what satisfies everyone else, and understanding that truth may change the way you see your entire life. There comes a moment when you stop asking why you never seem to fit into every place you enter, and begin noticing something even more surprising. Every time you tried to become someone else just to gain acceptance, the peace inside you quietly disappeared. At first you assumed that peace would come after people finally understood you, but instead you discovered that the moments when your heart felt closest to God were often the same moments when you felt least understood by the world around you. That realization can be unsettling because it forces you to confront a difficult truth. We naturally long to belong. We were created for relationship, for love, for community, yet there is a difference between belonging through authenticity and belonging through performance. Performance always demands another mask, Authenticity asks only for honesty before God, even when honesty is costly. Perhaps that is why this season has felt so exhausting. You have spent years carrying expectations that were never yours to carry. You felt responsible for making everyone comfortable, for becoming whatever was needed in each room, for never disappointing anyone, for never appearing weak, for never admitting how deeply certain words affected you. But hidden beneath all of that striving was a quiet fear. If people saw the real me, would they still stay? That fear has shaped more decisions than you may realize. It has influenced friendships, work, dreams, even prayers. Sometimes you ask God to change your circumstances when what your heart truly desired was the courage to stop hiding. God often answers differently than we expect. Instead of immediately removing every difficult situation, He patiently works within us, teaching us to anchor our identity in His faithfulness rather than in changing opinions. This work is rarely dramatic. It happens through ordinary days that seem almost forgettable. It happens when you choose kindness after disappointment. It happens when you continue praying, even though heaven feels quiet. It happens when you resist becoming bitter after another season of feeling overlooked. Character grows one faithful step at a time. Looking back, many of the people remembered throughout Scripture did not become who they were in a single extraordinary moment. They were shaped by long stretches of ordinary faithfulness. There were seasons when they could not see the whole picture, yet they continued trusting the one who could. Their confidence did not come from knowing every detail of the future. It came from believing that God's character remained constant, even when life was confusing. That same invitation stands before you. Not an invitation to pretend that loneliness does not hurt, or that rejection leaves no scars, but an invitation to bring those wounds honestly before the Lord instead of allowing them to define your identity. Your pain may explain some of your struggles, but it does not have the final word over who you are. God is able to bring growth even through experiences you would never have chosen for yourself. Think about how often your greatest moments of compassion were born from your deepest disappointments. The reason you notice people who feel invisible may be because you remember what invisibility felt like. The reason you are patient with those who struggle may be because you know how discouraging unanswered questions can become. The reason your prayers carry sincerity may be because they were forged through nights when all you had left was hope. None of that means suffering is good in itself, but it does remind us that God is able to redeem what once seemed only painful. Redemption does not erase the past. It gives the past a new place within the story. Instead of becoming a prison, it can become a testimony of God's sustaining grace. That does not mean every mystery will be solved or every longing fulfilled exactly as imagined. Faith is not certainty about every outcome. Faith is learning to trust the goodness of God, even when your understanding remains incomplete. As you continue forward, you may still have days when you wonder why you feel different. Those questions may not disappear overnight, yet perhaps they will no longer carry the same weight because they are no longer rooted in shame. Instead of seeing yourself as someone who failed to belong, you may slowly recognize yourself as someone whom God continues to shape with patience, wisdom, humility, and hope. If you have begun to notice even a small change in the way you see your own story, hold on to that. Transformation often begins quietly before it becomes visible. A heart that learns to rest in God's faithfulness gains a strength that circumstances alone can never provide. And sometimes, the greatest evidence of spiritual growth is not that every question has been answered, but that you have learned to keep walking with God even while some questions remain. As you look back over your life, you may begin to notice something that was impossible to see while you were living through it. The seasons that once appeared empty were not truly empty at all. They were quiet. They were hidden. They were uncomfortable. But they were not meaningless. Every disappointment that drove you to prayer instead of pride, every lonely evening that taught you to seek God's presence instead of endless distractions, every closed door that forced you to trust instead of control became part of a work that was taking place beneath the surface. We naturally measure life by visible progress. We celebrate achievements, recognition, and moments when everything seems to be falling into place. Yet much of God's transforming work happens where no one applauds. It happens in the unseen decisions to forgive when resentment would feel easier. It happens in choosing hope when circumstances invite despair. It happens in remaining faithful, even when no immediate reward appears. This is why feeling different does not have to become the defining sentence over your life. It can instead become a reminder that your deepest identity is not determined by whether you perfectly fit every environment, but by the steady love of the God who knows you completely. He knows every silent prayer you never spoke aloud. He knows every moment you smiled while quietly carrying grief. He knows the exhaustion of trying to explain feelings that even you struggled to understand. Nothing about your story has been hidden from him. That truth alone can bring a kind of peace the approval of people never could. Human acceptance is valuable, but it is also fragile. It changes with opinions, seasons, misunderstandings, and circumstances. God's faithfulness is not like that. His invitation remains the same through every season. Come to me, trust me, walk with me, grow with me. Even when you cannot yet see where the road is leading, you are not walking it alone. There may still be days ahead when loneliness returns unexpectedly. Certain memories may still sting. Some questions may remain unanswered for longer than you would prefer. Faith does not eliminate every struggle, but it changes the way we carry those struggles. Instead of believing that hardship proves God has forgotten you, you can remember that many faithful people throughout Scripture experienced seasons of waiting, uncertainty, and hiddenness before they clearly understood what God was doing. Their hope was sustained not because they possessed complete knowledge, but because they learned, little by little, that God's character could be trusted even when His timing remained mysterious. That same invitation is extended to you today. Do not measure God's presence only by how easy life feels. Sometimes His work is most profound when it seems least visible. A tree does not become strong during calm weather alone. Its roots deepen as it withstands storms. In the same way, perseverance, compassion, wisdom, and humility often grow through circumstances we would never willingly choose. None of this means you must pretend your pain is insignificant. Bring it honestly before God. The Psalms remind us that sincere faith makes room for tears, questions, and waiting. God is not threatened by your honesty. He welcomes the heart that comes to Him with humility, trusting that He hears even the prayers spoken through silence. As you continue this journey, resist the temptation to define yourself by comparison. Another person's path is not the measure of your own. Some appear to move quickly, while others spend long seasons growing in ways that cannot yet be seen. Both lives remain under God's loving care. Your calling is not to imitate every path around you, but to walk faithfully in the one before you. There is freedom in releasing the need to understand every chapter before turning the next page. Hope grows when we remember that today's confusion does not determine tomorrow's purpose. You may not yet see how every experience fits together, but you can choose to believe that no act of faithfulness, no sincere prayer, and no season of trusting God is ever wasted. If this message has reminded you that you are not alone in what you have been carrying, let your story become a source of encouragement for someone else. Share the ways God has sustained you through difficult seasons, even if the journey is still unfolding. Often the testimony that strengthens another person is not a story with every answer, but the quiet witness of someone who kept trusting God one day at a time. So when that familiar feeling returns and whispers that you are too different, too misunderstood, or too far behind, remember this instead. Your worth has never depended on blending into the crowd. Your identity has never rested on universal approval. The God who formed you knows you completely, loves you faithfully, and continues His work in you with patience and grace. Even when you cannot see the full picture, you can take the next faithful step. And sometimes that single step, taken in quiet trust, becomes the beginning of a deeper peace than you ever imagined possible.